And the flop is incredible. I pick up a royal flush draw. But here you see the surprising news. Small blind will donk bet 200,000, which is 50 big blinds. So he donk bets pot into 2 people. If I hit the diamond, I have the nuts. If I have a 10, I have a nuts. What would you do in this situation? And I grabbed chips and looked at his reaction. I think in live cash games, reading your opponent's tell is very important. And see if your opponent feels comfortable whenever I grab the chips or intending to call. Here I'm back with a brand new video. This is Poker Grinders, and today, as always, we're going to do some fun hand reviews. The game was hosted in CTP Taipei, and the game was invitational. Not anyone was allowed to join. You need to reserve in advance, and luckily, I managed to reserve one of the seats. When you buy into this game, you will be given 1,000,000 chips. On the first session, I kind of messed up, and I was also running not very good. Let's see if I can survive in this game. The game was pretty loosey-goosey. Everyone was playing a lot of hands, people were spazzing around, and they were just laughing and having fun. And in the first session, I was the only non-Taiwanese of the game, so it was kind of lonely. So let's jump into the first hand. The blinds are 2,000, 4,000, and the guy from under the gun +1. It's this guy. Very loose, plays queen 3 of diamonds and raises it up to 10,000. I do not think you're supposed to play this hand from early position, but it's okay. People have been playing worse hands. And the person from undergun +3, since we're playing 9-handed, I guess this is the low jack, flat calls with queen 9 offsuit. This is also a horrible call. And the cutoff with 4-3 suited, he also calls, which is ridiculous. I only showed you one hand, and I guess this will show you pretty much everything about the table dynamic. And on the button, it's me with pocket 7s. So even though there are a lot of colors, I think this mediocre pair is good enough to make the call. And since we're sitting down at 250 big blinds deep, we're deep enough to go for set mining. So I also make the call, and we're going 4 ways to the flop. This game is pretty different from the last video I showed you, right? People were playing very loose, and which means it's very profitable. So here comes the flop. The flop is not favorable to me. And who do you think will lead out on this board? It's not queen 3, and surprisingly, it's not queen 9. It's the 4-3 of spades who leads out. What? This is insane. So while I was playing the game, I didn't realize they were playing so terribly. There was so much betting going around, and I thought, like, how can they have it all the time? So yeah, this terrible gut shot with pocket 7s is an easy fold. And even queen 9 folds, because the stab was pretty big. So here comes the next hand. Under the gun, the same guy who raised queen 3 of diamonds picks up with pocket 7s and raises to 8,000. And this guy raises to min clicks to 16,000 with 7-4 offsuit, which is something that I don't really understand. And ace-jack offsuit also makes the call. And here I pick up ace-king offsuit and make a chunky 3-bet to 60,000. And let's see who gets involved into the pot. So under the gun with pocket 7s, I think it's a reasonable call for him. Queen 8 and 7-4 will presumably get out of the way. If they're really calling this hand, they're setting their money on fire. And ace-jack offsuit also calls. So since they are playing very deep, and maybe, I guess they're rich and have a lot of money, they have been playing very loose, and they play a lot of hands. But I do not want to get involved into this party, so I kept my tight range as usual. So whenever I get into the pot with them, and I'm always the favorite. And the flop comes 10-10-5 rainbow. I was in position, and the 2 callers checked to me. What would you do in this situation? It's a 3-bet pot, and you have ace-king, and the board is 10-10-5. So the 10 is sort of a neutrally card, although it will favor the caller a little bit more, since they will be calling more with a lot of suited 10s. And it's also very likely that one of those 2 players will have a pair, and a pair will obviously not fold on this board. So I decided to check back and see the turn. And at the turn comes the 9 of hearts. And people also like to stab and probe bet a lot. They don't like to check. They like to put money into the pot. And pocket 7s will lead on this turn card and makes a pretty big probe bet. He will bet 125 into 21, which is slightly more than half pot. Considering that it's a 3-bet pot, a half pot step is a very big bet. It's more than 30 big blinds. It's 31 big blinds. And I'm sure ace-jack will get out of the way. And the action comes to me. If your opponent makes a half pot pro bet multi-way into you, and you have ace-king, what would you do in this situation? So you don't have a draw. So if your opponent doesn't have an ace or a king, suppose he has a pair like pocket 8s, pocket jacks, or pocket queens, you will have 6 outs. And 6 outs on the turn will be approximately 12% equity. And if your opponent has pocket 8s or lower, the 9 will also counterfeit his pair. So in total, we're going to have about 9 outs. In this case, 1 ace has been removed, so we have 8 outs. And for a half pot bet, we require 25% equity. And the equity for 8 outs will be about 16 to 18%. So we do not have enough equity to justify the call. To remember things easier, if you have 2 overcards, you can call a half pot bet on the flop. So if you have 2 overcards on the flop, you can call a half pot bet. Because a half pot bet requires 25% equity. And if you have 2 overcards, which means you have 6 outs, and on the flop you can multiply your outs by 4, and that's approximately your equity. So you're gonna have 24% equity. A half pot bet on the flop will justify your call with 2 overcards. However, on the turn, your equity will drop down to half, so you're only gonna have 12% equity. So you can only call 2 overcards if your opponent makes a quarter pot bet on the turn. But if your opponent bets bigger than that, in a lot of situations, it will be more profitable for you to fold. So this is theory. So this doesn't apply into every spot, but this is a basic math that you would want to keep into your mind whenever you're considering to float or call with overcards. Since it's a half pot bet on the turn, I decided to fold this hand. Although, there's also a big chance that he might be bluffing with hands like suited hearts, or queen jack, or jack 8 suited, etc. And against those hands, we might actually be ahead. If he has a draw, we're ahead. If he has a pair, we're behind. But it's hard for you to make a decision on the table calculating all the combos. You need to narrow down your opponent's range by reading tells and the actions on previous streets. In this case, I didn't think Under the Gun will call with speculative hands against a big 3-bet, but people tend to call 3-bets, even though if it's a big size, if they're deep stacked with pocket pairs, because whenever they hit a set, they're gonna be good most of the time. So whenever a person calls out of position against the big 3-bet, if it's a cash game, a lot of their ranges are consisted of pocket pairs. Of course, I do not eliminate all the suited connectors that they are going to call out of position. So this is the next hand that we're going to play. And the player from Under the Gun +1, he raises with 5 deuce offsuit to 8,000. And Under the Gun +3, which is to the low jack, makes the call with 7-6 offsuit. I will not make any comments about that anymore. And on the hijack, I pick up ace queen of diamonds. I guess since we have a caller in between, it's always going to be a 3-bet. And seeing that people are playing so loose, you can happily value 3-bet with this hand. And I raise it up to 33,000. Now that I think about it, I think I might go even bigger than this. This is a 4x sized 3-bet. And everyone's playing 250 big blinds. I think I can make it even bigger, like 5x or 6x, which is gonna be 40 or 48,000. But here on the button we have a cold call, and the small blind also cold calls. The small blind cold calls with king queen offsuit, and we do not know what the button has cold call with. I would suppose it might be a pair. No, there you go, it's pocket 8s. So pocket 8s, pocket 7s, pocket 6s, in those kind of settings people will cold call 3-bets a lot. So do not expect a lot of fold equity. And 7-6 offsuit also peels, and we're going to see a 4-way 3-bet pot. So if it's a 3-bet pot, it's most likely to be 3 ways or 4 ways or even 5 ways. So get yourself ready. It's gonna be pretty messy. And the flop is incredible. I pick up a royal flush draw. Although the small blind has picked top pair, but seen from the equity, I'm way ahead of him. But finally, 7-6 offsuit steps, which I think it's just, I don't even want to talk about it anymore. He donk bets 30,000. And for me, it's either a call or a raise. But in this kind of settings, you do not generate a lot of fold equity. So I think it's good for my monster draw to realize my equity by calling. And King Queen offsuit also calls with his top pair. And the turn is the 7 of hearts, which doesn't improve my hand. But here you see the surprising news. Small blind will donk bet 200,000, which is 50 big blinds. So he donk bets pot into 2 people. This is just ridiculous. I do not understand their thought process at all. So I guess he just donk bets because there are 2 flush draws out there. And now that 7-6 offsuit has picked up his pair, he might consider calling. But here he gets out of the way. Now the action comes to me, which is very dicey for me because the pot-sized donk bet is a pretty big bet. If you see at my outs, I still have a lot of outs. If I hit the diamond, I have the nuts. If I have a 10, I have a nuts. If I hit an ace, I might also likely to be good. But I wasn't so sure if I can profitably call against the pot-sized bet. One thing I knew for sure is if I hit my flush or a gut shot, I will for sure stack him off because I don't think he will fold any top pair or any 2 pair. So, which means you have a lot of implied odds. And I tanked for a long time. I had 5 time chips and I threw all 5 of them before I made the decision. Because 200,000, that's a big chunk of my stack. What would you do in this situation? I think there might be even people who will fold. What I also thought the other option is to raise as a bluff or even go all in. But the problem is that I don't think I can generate a lot of fold equity on this table because people are such calling stations. They do not want to fold, they're here to call and gamble around. And I didn't think bluff raising is the ideal move to make. And we might also be against very strong hands, 2 pair plus like King Jack or even pocket 7s. And I grabbed chips and looked at his reaction. I think in live cash games, reading your opponent's tell is very important. And see if your opponent feels comfortable whenever I grab the chips or intending to call. I think this will give you a lot of valuable information. And I looked at him and he looked pretty comfortable and it seemed like he didn't mind me calling. He was like, yeah, you can call and I don't mind. I'm gonna bet the river again, is what his face looked like. And from that information, I concluded that if I hit my flush, it's gonna be game over. And I think he looks pretty comfortable. I tanked for such a long time because I also considered folding this hand because this 50 big blind donk bet, this was such a big bet. Yeah, will I make this call? I think I tanked for too long. Yeah, this kind of indicates weakness. I think I tanked too long and river breaks out so easy and he goes for the snap lead for 150,000. It's even a down bet. It's like quarter pot. It's so humiliating for me because I can't call neither raise. And yeah, sadly, I made the snap fold. This is so sad. I can't bluff anymore. This is like, it's too late. Yep. But I don't think I made any mistakes. It's like just the table dynamic was so messy and unfortunately, I didn't get there on the river, which is okay. But now I'm down to 658,000, which is not great news. But it is what it is. Let's see if I can get my stack back. And here on the next hand, under the gun with King 6 offsuit, raises it up to 8,000. And I make the flat call from low jack with King Jack of hearts. The screen doesn't show my hand, but I had King Jack of hearts. Hijack flat calls with Ace Deuce suited, and Big Blind calls with 7-4 offsuit. And here's the flop. I hit the nut flush draw along with the gut shot. I had such a monster draw. I keep flopping monster draws over and over again. And here, since it's a 4-way pot, I decide not to stab. And the guy from the hijack will stab with his ace. He steps for 20,000. 7-4 gets out of the way, King 6 off gets out of the way. And now the action comes to me. So now I have the flush draw and the gut shot. But as I said earlier, I do not generate any fold equity on this table. An ace will not fold, a queen will not fold. So if that's the case, I think check calling is the option to go. And the turn pairs 4, which doesn't improve my hand. And hijack checks back. And I think making this check back, I think this also indicates a lot of weakness. And the river breaks again. So every time I hit a monster draw on the flop, I never get there, which is so sad. And as I said, turning this hand into a bluff, I don't think that is also the best move. And now since I've checked twice, I've shown a lot of weakness, which will make him bet again. 55,000. And I fold with my king high. So this is how I lost quite a few chips on the first session. Let's see if I can get them back. So here under the gun +2, I pick up pocket 4s and I raise it up to 10,000. And the button flat calls with ace-9 offsuit, and big blind also calls with queen jack off. So this time it's gonna be a 3-way pot. In the flop comes Jack 6-4 and I hit bottom set. The RFID shows it's King Jack 6, but as you can see it's Jack 6-4. I hit bottom set, which is amazing. And I was so excited to extract value finally. And now I will show you how much value you can extract from a 1-pair hand with your set. And here on the flop, I make a bet of 12,000. Button gets out of the way, and the big blind makes a small raise to 28,000, which is a little bit more than min click. And at this point I thought I put him on a lot of pairs and 2 pairs and just random straight draws, and I've seen him raising with a lot of weak top pairs or weak draws. And those hands will not fold if I re-raise. That's why I decided to make the flop 3-bet to 62,000. And now, yeah, everyone stopped talking because a flop 3-bet is pretty rare to see on this table. But Queen Jack doesn't go anywhere with his top pair, and he makes the call. And the turn comes the King of Clubs, which of course favors my range a lot. So this is a card that will kill a lot of his action, is what you think. He checks again, and this time I go for a pretty big bet. I go for 2/3 pot, which is 105,000. And he thinks for a while and makes the call. So now the pot's already 366,000, which is 150 big blinds. Haha. So this is how big the flop can inflate when you re-raise against the flop check raise, as opposed to just calling. You want to make the pot as big as possible when you are in a big favorite. And the river is the deuce of hearts. Big blind checks, and let's see how big I can go. I start to think a jack or a 6 or a medium-ish pocket pair will fold if I shove. So I have to decide, so I have to pick a size for him to make the call with second pair or a medium-ish pair. I thought for a couple of seconds, and the bet was 240,000, which is again 2/3 pot. So I made the flop 3-bet, bet 2/3 pot on the turn, and 2/3 pot on the river. So he thinks for a while, because his second pair is now a bluff catcher, but he makes the call. And he sees the bad news. Look at the pot, it's 900,000, which is more than 200 big blinds. So whenever you have a good hand, think of how you can inflate the pot as quickly as possible and as big as you can. So now I'm back to 1.8 million. So here comes the next hand. I pick up ace-10 of diamonds from under the gun. The blinds have been increased, so now it's 3,000, 6,000. And I raise to 15. Fold around to seat number 4, the hijack with 8-6 of diamonds. Cutoff calls with the mystery hand. Button gets out of the way. The small blind also calls with king-9 of diamonds. So we have 3 players with all diamonds, and if we get there, yeah, we're gonna scoop a huge pot. And big blind calls with queen-9 offsuit, which you're supposed to fold. However, we only see 1 diamond, but we hit second pair, which isn't the worst. And here we see the big blind again donk betting with his open-ended straight draw. I don't think he knows what he's doing. So the bet was 45, and I think it's a pretty easy call for me, even though it's four-handed. People will just lead donk bet with random crap. 8-6 gets out of the way, and the small blind with his gut shot plus backdoor flush draw will call. So we go 3 ways to the turn, and the turn pairs the jack. At this point, it's less likely that your 2 opponents will have a jack. So I put them more on a drawish kind of hand like queen-9, king-queen, or 8-9. They might as well also just have a 10. And against all of those hands, I'm pretty much ahead. However, if they donk bet big again, I might reconsider. Small blind checks, and big blind checks this time. By the time that they both have checked again, I have eliminated a lot of Jack-X from their range. I put them on a lot of 10x weak pairs or draws like Queen 9 or King 9 or King Queen, like this situation. So my pair with Top Kicker was good enough to go for a value bet on the turn. And also, they did not bluff check raise me at all. I've never seen a bluff check raise on this table yet. So I can value bet with my second pair with impunity. The pot is 210 and my turn bet was 80. Small blind gets out of the way and the big blind with the open ender makes the snap call. So if he's check calling, I think this is very good news because if he had a jack, he will for sure raise. So we're mostly ahead. And the river is an 8, so Queen 9 gets there. And he had Queen 9. Oh my god. I just hope he didn't have Queen 9. But I think going for another bet might be a little bit too thin. So I decided to check back. And at first, I thought I was good, so I was just about to turn over my cards. But I realized that he hit the straight on the river. So sad, so sick, so sick. You know, you make the perfect moves on every straight, but still your opponent gets there on the river. That's how tough the game is. But I believed in myself and I was confident that I will get my chips back at some point. So that's the first part of the game. In the next video, I'm going to show you how it feels like if you're running hot. If you enjoyed the content, please hit the subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.